All right, today we're going to be tearing into a 2001 Honda Rubicon 500. This is the Honda-matic. We pulled some parts off already to get this video going, but we're going to go ahead and start by pulling the head off, the cylinder head here, the water pump assembly, the cylinder, and then we're going to go ahead and pull stator, flywheel, and then split that crankcase. So I'm going to start off, we'll pull this cylinder head. We are going to have to pull these valve covers. Check a different video for, I did a valve adjustment on this machine, and but there's 10mm bolts underneath these covers here. We've got the water lines here. You're going to be careful. I've pulled this motor and drained a lot of the coolant out, but make sure that doesn't go all over when you start pulling these lines. And this is where your thermostat is going to be on this one. Sometimes these hoses get hot and they kind of melt onto the head. Got these bolts off there. I'm going to go ahead and pull all the rockers off here. We also need to pull the cam chain tensioner, which is going to be clear down here right beside the cylinder. We've got to pull that before we pull this head and make sure we don't, it's always a good idea to pull that first. That's 8mm. If you take and twist that all the way out, that takes the pressure off of that cam chain. And then I'll go ahead and remove this head cover here. Got 14mm bolts up top. Checks torque settings on these because they will need to be torqued. All right, and then all these head cover bolts should be off. There you go, you can see your push rods here. And we've got your head gasket here, or your head cover gasket. We've got your caps here, your push rod caps. And then we'll get ready to pull this head. We'll do our other side of the water line. I'm actually going to pull this off separate from that head. You know, there's several bolts down here that we'll have to take off, so that's why I'm pulling this, just so we can get in and see everything. There's a couple O-rings that hold this onto the head. There we go, there. It's off. It looks like this bottom was holding us up there, so now we're going to go ahead and remove these bolts that we couldn't get to before. 10mm bolts so we can keep removing this head. Wiggle this head off now. I'm just going to pull this gasket, so you want to replace these gaskets if you're pulling that head cover off. That's all it took, just a little bit of wiggling back and forth is all. And we've got the cylinder head off. The gasket's what's kind of holding us up now. It kind of catches on the threads of these studs. So there's the head there. Flip it upside down. We've got your 2 intake valves there. You've got your 2 exhaust. Still hooked up with this hose to our water pump assembly there. And we've got our camshaft here. And it should be looser than it is. Oh, this cam chain tensioner here, how I said turn it all the way clockwise and it'll stick, and it does, but if it gets jolted at all, it'll pop back in, which you want it to do, because if it's for whatever reason loosens up, it'll pop right back while the four-wheeler's running. So it's always putting pressure on there. If it doesn't put pressure on there, it could potentially skip a tooth on your sprocket here, which will cause some serious problems. cam is loose. Just go ahead and take that tensioner out. So grab an 8mm socket with a small extension on there. And this might give us a little more play in that chain. And just take and tap on that. That's all you have to do. There we go. See if that gives us, that's going to give us enough play to remove that chain all the way off of that sprocket there. So now we've got your cam there. You've got the bottom plate that holds it. Tip that upside down, let the oil drain out. And we've got your cylinder next, and it's the same situation here. We've got 10mm bolts on the base. Some of these we're not going to be able to get to with the impact. This water line here can just be pulled off. There's an O-ring in here. You want to make sure that that's good. You might be able to get to and then none on which would be the back of the motor. Now what you can do is take on this case here in a spot that's obviously, again, not going to damage a gasket, but we just go right underneath there just to be able to get some leverage. A lot of times it's hard to get fingers in there, stuff like that. So if you can get a spot where you got a crowbar, that's not going to damage any gasket surfaces, break any aluminum, you can do that. So there's your cylinder there. You want to make sure and inspect your walls, make sure those are good. Got oil and coolant in that sleeve there. Take and set that upside down, let that drain. Then we're going to pull this piston. And what I'm going to do for that, I grab a pick, looks like this here with an angle on it. And I'm going to come in from the side here and grab that clip and pry out. Now I take my thumb, and sometimes you get stabbed doing this, but put it over top of that clip and over top of that pick. You don't want to have to fall down in the motor, especially if you're not tearing into your bottom end. We are, but if you're not, you want to make sure that that clip doesn't fall in. Now you can take your finger on the other side, push through. If you can't get it through and have to use a hammer or some kind of punch, you want to be very, very careful. Generally at that point, your crank is already damaged, but you don't want to just take a hammer and just slam on things on your motor. So you want to take and set a block or something underneath of that. Now to get that pin back, or that clip back in, I take it, leave the open side up, push it down as far as I can. Then I take a pick or a small screwdriver, press it down the rest of the way, stick it in that groove, make sure it's completely sealed. So that piston's in great condition. I'm going to set it with that cylinder. We're going to go ahead and reuse that.